It's week 10 of the NFL season, and here are my predictions for this week. But first, how did I do last week? In week 9, I was 10-5 in my predictions. So kicking off the week on Thursday Night Football, we have the 4-5 Bengals versus the 6-3 Ravens. The Bengals are coming off of a 41-24 win against the Raiders, and Joe Burrow had a great game, going 27 of 39 with 251 yards, 5 touchdowns, and an interception. Then Chase Brown had a big game with 120 yards rushing and 5 receptions for 37 yards and a touchdown. And on defense, Trey Hendrickson had 4 sacks and now leads the NFL with 11 on the season. Then the Ravens blew out the Broncos 41-10, and Lamar Jackson went 16 of 19, 280 yards and 3 touchdowns, and had a perfect passer rating. Then Derrick Henry had 106 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, and is the first player to reach 1,000 yards on the season. He has 1,052 with 11 rushing touchdowns, while also having 2 receiving touchdowns. And Zay Flowers had another great game with 5 receptions, 127 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he's now had over 110 yards in 4 out of his last 5 games. Coming into this week, the Bengals have won 3 out of 4 games, and the Ravens have won 6 out of their last 7. And they played each other back in week 5, and it was one of the best games of the season. The Ravens won 41-38 in overtime. Burrow and Jackson combined for over 700 yards passing and 9 passing touchdowns. So this is going to be a great game. But I have the Bengals winning this time. Then moving over to Sunday, we have an early morning Germany game between the 2-7 Giants and the 2-7 Panthers. The Giants are coming off a 27-22 loss to the Commanders, and that is their 4th straight loss. Daniel Jones went 20 of 26, 174 yards and 2 touchdowns, and had 54 yards rushing with a touchdown. And Malik Neighbors had 9 receptions for 59 yards. Then the Panthers got their second win of their season, 23-22 against the Saints. Bryce Young went 16 of 26, 171 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Then Chuba Hubbard had 72 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Jatavion Sanders had 4 receptions for 87 yards. And right now the Panthers are leading the NFL in most yards given up per game with 391. So the Giants offense could look pretty good this week, and I have the Giants winning. Then the 5-4 Broncos versus the 8-0 Chiefs. In the Broncos' loss against the Ravens, Bo Nix went 19 of 33, 223 yards, and an interception. And Cortland Sutton had 7 receptions for 122 yards, and he threw a 2-yard touchdown to Bo Nix. Then the Chiefs won 30-24 against the Buccaneers on Monday Night Football. And this was a great game going down to the wire, where Baker Mayfield threw a 1-yard touchdown to Ryan Miller with 27 seconds left to tie the game. Then in overtime, the Chiefs won the coin toss and drove all the way down the field, and Kareem Hunt scored a 2-yard rushing touchdown. But overall in the game, Patrick Mahomes went 34-44, 291 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Kareem Hunt had 106 yards and a touchdown, and now in 5 games on the Chiefs this season, he has 114 yards and 5 touchdowns. And Travis Kelce had 14 receptions for 100 yards, and I have the Chiefs winning. Next, the 6-2 Steelers versus the 7-2 Commanders. The Steelers are coming off their bye week, and their last game in Week 8, they won 26-18 against the Giants on Monday Night Football. And for the Commanders, they got their 3rd straight win against the Giants. Jaden Daniels went 15 of 22, 209 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Noah Brown led them in receiving yards with 5 receptions for 60 yards. Then Terry McLaurin had 2 receptions for 19 yards and 2 touchdowns. This is another great matchup. It's the number 3 team in the AFC versus the number 2 seed in the NFC. The Commanders are 4-0 this season at home, but Mike Tomlin in his career is 13-4 after a bye week and has won his last 7 games. So I have the Steelers winning. Then we have the 6-2 Vikings versus the 2-7 Jaguars. Minnesota broke their 2-game losing streak with a 21-13 win over the Colts. Sam Darnold went 28 of 34, 290 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Aaron Jones had 64 yards rushing, and Justin Jefferson had 7 receptions for 137 yards. And he now leads the NFL with 783 receiving yards. Then for the Jaguars, they lost 28-23 against the Eagles, and at one point in this game they were down 22-0, and they were able to make this one close, but it was just too big of a hole to climb out of. Trevor Lawrence didn't have a good game at all, going 16 of 31, 169 yards, and 2 interceptions. As a team, they had 18 carries for 60 yards rushing, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Both of them were by Trevor Lawrence. And their leading receiver was Evan Ingram with 5 receptions for 45 yards. And right now, the Jags are giving up the second most yards per game at 389 yards. So I have the Vikings winning. Then we have the 6-3 Falcons versus the 2-7 Saints. The Falcons are coming off of a 27-21 win against the Cowboys. Kirk Cousins went 19 of 24, 222 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Then Bijan Robinson had 86 yards rushing and 7 receptions for 59 yards. Then for the Saints, they lost their 7th game in a row, and in that game, Derek Carr went 18 of 31 with 236 yards and a touchdown. And Alvin Kamara had a huge game with 155 yards rushing and 6 receptions for 60 yards. And after that loss to the Panthers, the Saints did fire their head coach, and I have the Falcons winning. Then the 4-4 49ers versus the 4-5 Buccaneers. The 49ers are coming off their bye week, and in their last game, they beat the Cowboys 30-24 on Sunday Night Football. And this week, they did activate Christian McCaffrey to start practicing. Then for the Buccaneers, in their loss against the Chiefs, Baker Mayfield went 23 of 31 with 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Cade Otton had 8 receptions for 77 yards and a touchdown. I really think this game could go either way. The Buccaneers have lost 3 games in a row, but I think the Buccaneers are going to have a bounce back week and win. Next, the 7-2 Bills versus the 4-5 Colts. Last week, the Bills won 30-27 against the Dolphins, and now they have a very comfortable 4-game lead over the Jets for the division. In that game, the Dolphins tied it up 27-27 with 1:38 left. Then with 5 seconds left on the clock, Tyler Bass hit a 61-yard field goal. And Josh Allen went 25 of 39, 235 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception, and now has 2,000 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions on the season. And Ray Davis led them in receiving with 2 receptions, 70 yards, and a touchdown. And for the Colts, in their loss versus the Vikings, Joe Flacco had just 179 yards and an interception. Jonathan Taylor was held to 48 yards, and Josh Downs had 6 receptions for 60 yards. The Colts also didn't have any offensive touchdowns in this game, with their only touchdown coming from a 38-yard fumble recovery. The Colts have now lost 2 games in a row, and they are 3-1 at home, but I still have the Bills winning. Next, the 2-7 Patriots versus the 4-4 Bears. The Patriots are coming off of a 20-17 loss in overtime against the Titans. Drake May went 29 of 41 with 206 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions, and he had 95 yards rushing. Then Hunter Henry had 7 receptions for 56 yards. Then the Bears are coming off of a 29-9 loss against the Cardinals, and Caleb Williams went 22 of 41 with 217 yards. DeAndre Swift had 51 yards rushing, and Rome Odunze had 5 receptions for 104 yards. The Bears have now lost 2 games in a row, but they are 4-0 this season when they are at home, and I have the Bears winning. Then the 2-6 Titans versus the 5-3 Chargers. In the Titans' win over the Patriots, Mason Rudolph went 20 of 33, 240 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Tony Pollard had 128 yards rushing, and Calvin Ridley had 5 receptions for 73 yards. And on defense, they had 4 sacks, and Amani Hooker had 2 interceptions. Then for the Chargers, they beat the Browns 27-10. Justin Herbert went 18 of 27, 282 yards and 2 touchdowns. J.K. Dobbins had 85 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. And Quentin Johnston had 4 receptions, 118 yards and a touchdown. And that was his first career 100-yard game. This season, the Chargers are giving up the least amount of points per game with just 12.6. But the Titans are allowing the least amount of yards per game at 269. So this is probably going to be a low-scoring game, and I have the Chargers winning. Then we have the 6-2 Eagles versus the 3-5 Cowboys. In the Eagles' win over the Jaguars, Jalen Hurts went 18 of 24, 230 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he had 67 yards rushing and a touchdown. Then Saquon Barkley had 159 yards rushing and a touchdown, and 3 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown. So now on the season, Saquon Barkley has 925 yards rushing, which is second behind Derrick Henry. Then for the Cowboys, in their loss over the Falcons, Dak Prescott went 18 of 24 with 133 yards and a touchdown, but he left early in this game with a hamstring injury and is ruled out this week. Then Cooper Rush, when he came in, he went 13 of 25 with 115 yards and a touchdown. Then also this week, CeeDee Lamb is questionable with a shoulder injury and is considered week to week. So I have the Eagles winning. Then the 3-6 Jets versus the 5-4 Cardinals. The Jets are coming off of a 21-13 win against the Texans, and they broke their 5-game losing streak. Aaron Rodgers went 22 of 32, 211 yards and 3 touchdowns. Breece Hall had 74 yards rushing, and Devontae Adams had 7 receptions for 91 yards and a touchdown. And their defense had 8 sacks. Then for the Cardinals, in their win against the Bears, Kyler Murray went 13 of 20 and 154 yards. James Conner led the team in rushing yards with 107, and the team combined for 213 with 3 touchdowns. And their defense had 6 sacks. And the Cardinals also traded for outside linebacker Baron Browning from the Broncos. But the Cardinals have won 4 out of 5 games, and I have the Cardinals winning. Then on Sunday Night Football, the 7-1 Lions versus the 6-3 Texans. Last week the Lions won 24-14 against the Packers. Jared Goff went 18 of 22 with 145 yards and a touchdown. David Montgomery had 73 yards rushing, and Jahmyr Gibbs had 65 yards rushing and a touchdown. Then for the Texans, CJ Stroud went 11 of 30 with 191 yards. Joe Mixon had 106 yards rushing and a touchdown, and Tank Dell had 6 receptions for 126 yards. The Lions did trade for Zadarius Smith, and they gave up a 2025 5th-round pick and a 2026 6th-round pick. The Lions have been one of the best teams all season long, and their defense just got better by adding Zadarius Smith, so I have the Lions winning. Then on Monday Night Football, the 2-6 Dolphins versus the 4-4 Rams. Last week in the Dolphins' loss against the Bills, Tua went 25 of 28, 231 yards and 2 touchdowns. Devin Achane had 63 yards and a touchdown rushing, and he had 8 receptions for 58 yards and a touchdown. Then for the Rams, they beat the Seahawks 26-20 in overtime. Matt Stafford went 25 of 44, 298 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. Kyron Williams had 69 yards rushing and 1 reception for 26 yards. And DeMarcus Robinson had 6 receptions for 94 yards and 2 touchdowns. And their defense had 7 sacks and 3 interceptions. The Rams have also won 3 games in a row. They're at home this week and they're 3-1 at home. So I have the Rams winning. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. Goodbye.